So this is a journey on walking in the truth, and the first few videos, I encourage you to go back on those, is reflecting through the reality that we are not reliable sources of truth as individuals, and we kind of need resources. And so what am I basing my life existence on? And there are a number of options that I discussed in previous videos. And I encourage you, if you examine all the options, none of them have quite the claim that Christianity does and the Bible does. That you have a man who rose from the dead to prove that he is the voice of truth, and that his book, so to speak, the Bible, is the voice of that truth also, to reveal to us the way we are to live, what's ahead of us, what's the meaning of life, and all of those things. So, but how do we know that? So last video I talked about how it is completely historically accurate that a man named Jesus Christ started a religious movement and was crucified and claimed to be risen from the dead in the first century. Now, that's clear. Most people, even atheists, don't deny that. You really have to deny all of ancient history to deny that Jesus existed. The more challenging part is whether or not Jesus rose from the dead, and that's where you'll get some conflict. So did he rise from the dead? Did he prove himself worthy to be trusted with the things that he said? Now, I know that you might say, well, how do I know that the Bible is from God? How do I know that those accounts are from Jesus? We'll get to that, but we're starting here with the resurrection of Jesus. I think it's a good place to start. Now, the reason why it's going to get challenging is because a lot of atheists will not allow Christian historians to speak into what took place because they're biased. The problem with that is that the Roman government, for the most part, didn't care to document this faith. In fact, they cared to persecute the faith. So it's of no surprise that they're not documenting things out. Also, another puzzling thing is the existence of Christianity at all is very puzzling, because it came about in the first century. That's historically reliable, that this movement started in the first century under various claims that we're talking about. And it started, and then it was persecuted. And I believe even one of those quotes I put in there from last week's video is a quote that talks about how there was a great conflict between the Jews and some other religious sect known as Christians. So the Jews, and the New Testament claims this also, the Jews strongly opposed and persecuted the Christians, and the Roman government strongly opposed and persecuted the Christians. How in the world did it survive? And it not only survived, but in the early 300s, the 4th century AD, a Roman emperor became Christian and established the Christian faith, and it is still, the Christian faith is still the dominant religious belief of the world. How did that happen? How did it come to that? Especially in a world that at the time, first century, was so filled with polytheism. How did we get a monotheistic triune God scenario? How did that happen? Where did this come from? And so to deny the Christians to be able to have a voice in this is just kind of surprising to me. Most historians, and I'll put some more links here, but most historians will recognize that the Christians were persecuted in the first century, and that the Christians claim that Jesus rose from the dead. This is where the Bible enters in. Now, you might say, well, I don't believe the Bible. That's fine, but the Bible is definitely, particularly the Gospels, is definitely evidence that the Christians were claiming something in the first century. So you might not believe it, but the Bible, the Christians were claiming, and we see that in Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. The disciples of Jesus were claiming that Jesus Christ had risen from the dead. Now, There are a number of theories that atheists will use to try to supplant this notion. And one is called the swoon theory, and that is that Jesus survived the crucifixion. Most reasonable people do not accept that. Medical examiners and such who have studied what the crucifixion does to the body, one, there is really no way that somebody survives this crucifixion. Secondly, if a person survived the crucifixion, it would take them a lengthy period of time to recuperate from the injuries that they sustained. The writers of the New Testament claim that Jesus appeared to them 3 days after his crucifixion. There is no way he would have recovered by then. So let's say hypothetically he survived the crucifixion. He would be in such a broken state 3 days after that would have no way convinced them that Jesus Christ had risen from the dead. So the swoon theory is pretty bottom on the list. Another theory is that the disciples were hallucinating. You know, they thought they saw Jesus, but they didn't, because they were just seeing it in their minds. Now, there's a couple problems with that. One is that hallucinations usually happen with something that you're hoping or wanting to take place, and so, or believing it will take place, and then you hallucinate it into existence. Well, the apostles, if you read the accounts, again, you can say that this isn't true, but this is what they were claiming. Okay, they were claiming that they did not believe Jesus was going to rise from the dead. They were completely dejected, thought everything was over when Jesus died on that cross, and so and then in their minds, that was the furthest thing from their mind, that Jesus was going to rise from the dead. So it would not be likely that they would hallucinate something that they thought was pretty much, I mean, it wasn't even in their minds, so their mind wouldn't have hallucinated that. Secondly, they claim, the early Christians, now again, I'm just saying they claim, you might say, well, I don't believe that, but this is what they're claiming, that they saw Jesus, the resurrected Jesus, in groups. Some smaller groups, others up to about 500 people at one time. Together we're seeing Jesus. If you know anything about hallucinations, you cannot share hallucinations. You can hallucinate as an individual, but you cannot see the same hallucination that somebody else is. And so this is not possible for them to have hallucinated. The other claim is that the disciples stole the body, which would mean they were lying about their testimony, and I'll get to that in just a second. Or that somebody else stole the body, which again, not likely, because there was a heavy guard that was guarding the tomb to make sure that the body wasn't taken. So I don't know how you would explain that. Plus, all the signs point to that that the body was missing. That seems to be the most accepted truth here, is the body was missing. If it wasn't, why in the world? So if the Roman government and the Jews were trying to stop this apparently new faith called Christianity, all they would have to do, because it was based on the resurrection, that was the claim. Jesus rose from the dead, that's why we should follow this guy. All they would have to do is take the body of Jesus, and again, this was there were contemporaries here at the time who lived during these things. All they would have to do is go take the body out of the tomb and go parade around and say, look, he's still dead. And they would have ended the Christian movement, but the Christian movement didn't stop. The Roman government nor the Jews never brought the body out. In fact, their claim was the disciples stole the body. Do you understand what that means? That means that the disciples faced death for their claims, and then they died. They were executed for their claims. They were supposed to reject their claims or be executed, and they died in the face of that. Now, if we're saying they lied, that they stole the body to create this new faith, and they lied about it, who would actually die to maintain a lie like that? It just doesn't seem reasonable that someone would die to maintain a lie like that. What are they going to gain? Because they're dying. Like, I can understand you're lying, upholding a lie to get out of trouble. but that's not what they were faced with. All they had to do was reject what they were claiming, and they were safe, but they wouldn't do it. Something substantial happened. And so the only options are that they lied, or that they hallucinated, or Jesus resurrected from the dead. These are the most reasonable options, and the most reasonable option is that Jesus resurrected from the dead, apart from our desire to want to reject the supernatural. It's hard to look back at this stuff and say that Jesus didn't rise from the dead, but that's where the rubber meets the road. Is that most atheists that you encounter, if you are an atheist, I challenge you to look into yourself. Most people do not want this to be true. They don't want it to be true. And you might have various reasons why you don't want it to be true. But just because you don't want it to be true, does that make it not true? Does that make it false? You can see this now with some are actually trying to find a way to deny that the persecution took place. And you can see where this is just sitting in the power seat of the skeptic. I'm just going to deny everything and make you prove everything 100%, when there's reasonable justification to accept this idea. Again, how in the world did the Christian faith come into existence apart from some substantial miracle that took place? Let's throw in there also that the Jews, who for centuries worshiped God on Saturday, on the Sabbath day, and then all of a sudden a large amount of them started worshiping God on a Sunday. Why make that transition? Something significant happened. I believe that it is that Jesus rose from the dead, and we have to face these realities. We have to face that this is the evidence, and we have to decide why we want to reject it. Is it truly because there's no historical evidence? Is it truly because there's no plausibility that this is what took place? Or is it just because we don't want to? And if we don't want to, why? Why don't we want to? So we'll continue journeying on the next step. How do we know that the New Testament is true, the Old Testament, the Bible as a whole? And then once we've established that and decided we're going to trust in the Bible, and feel free to give me questions if you're not on board with me there, especially if you're willing to respond back. And if you're not willing to respond back, or you want to be a little more private about it, then go find us on Facebook, Bethel Pittsburgh, and jump on the messenger and message me, and I'll be glad to respond to you. But let's continue looking to embrace the truth. God bless you.